Hello and welcome to my channel. I am Zodiac Bandit, and today we have some spoilers and potential spoilers for Campaign 3 of Critical Role all the way up to episode 98. So if you aren't caught up yet, I recommend clicking off and, watching later. Watching once you're caught up. It's actually funny because technically episode 98 isn't out to the public yet, only for those who went to the live show, but still, potential spoilers for it either way. So I am a massive fan of the Witcher video games, specifically 2 and 3. I have not actually been able to play The Witcher 1 yet, but I have played 2 and 3 at least 4 times each, and because of that I've gotten a new interest into the books. And now I'm only just on The Last Wish, which is the first book in the series, so please no spoilers for anything within the books. Video games, you guys want to talk about those all day long, that's okay in the comments. But because of this newfound interest I've had in the books, it has actually gotten me rather interested in D&D monsters specifically, and I'm very much enjoying what I've been reading about a lot of monsters, but it's got me curious. It's got me wondering how powerful Dominox is supposed to be when he eventually appears in Critical Role, whether it be episode 89 or whether it be in some future later on episode, because maybe the live show didn't get to him yet. But it has gotten me very curious into how strong Dominox is. Now, the image you're seeing is not Dominox himself. It is just a chained devil, but I feel like Chained Devil and Dominox might be very similar based on how he has an obsession with chains, and his name is Dominox, and this looks, yeah. Now, Tavon, the champion of Asmodeus, is where we got most of our information about Dominox from as of episode 97. And he claims that Dominox is a grand demon, which is a step down from a demon lord. Not exactly his wording, but he did say that it is still a great task and a dangerous one at that. And that got me curious about exactly how powerful these grand demons are supposed to be. Where in the spectrum of CR do these creatures land? And that is what we're talking about today.
Be with you for a time until I'm called away. But to bring back the head of a grand demon is quite the task. And you see for a second like that, like Hunter's joy kind of shift into reality. And that confidence becomes calculation. There are few types of demons beneath the lords. The Grands are dangerous. And the Grand Demon of Loathing has quite a mythology.
So there are a bunch of tools that we can use as a group or as a DM to figure out the rough strength of a combat encounter before you even throw that encounter at your players. That way you know if the encounter you're making is too dangerous or if it's not dangerous enough for your liking. And the one that I like to use, and the one that I think most people would use and automatically thought of when I started talking about this, would be Kobold Fight Club. A Kobold Fight Club can be used in two different ways. One, you can plug in how many players you have in their level, choose anywhere between easy to deadly as a combat encounter, and then push generate, and that will create a sort of combat encounter. And you can make it so it's just a single boss monster, a horde of monsters, a boss monster, and some like minions below it. You can do it a bunch of different ways, and it'll generate a combat encounter. And if it's too deadly for your players, you can choose to scale it back, or if it's not deadly enough, you can scale it up. So it's a very useful tool. There is another way you can use it. It's not the one we're using today, but there is one where you can pick a monster, put your players in, how many there are and what their level is, and it'll generate the sort of difficulty there, and it can tell you if it's too dangerous or not for your players. So it is a very useful tool, and if you haven't been using it in your DM and you've been struggling to make a fair or fun combat encounter, this is a good start for that. So using Kobold Fight Club, I plugged in 7 players at level 13 because there are currently 7 players and they're at level 13, and I chose a hard level encounter. I didn't want to start at deadly. I don't think Matt is aiming to kill too many of the players in front of a large crowd, so I put it at hard and selected boss monster. Then it generated a monster for me, and the first one to come up was Baphomet, a demon lord. So we're going to have to scale it back just a little bit and go down to a medium encounter because Baphomet is stronger than a grand demon. He is a demon lord, and much like Tavon said, a grand demon is below that. So again, we're going to have to scale this down a little bit. So just for comparison before moving on to the medium category of strength as far as CR is concerned, another creature that has appeared in Critical Role that is a CR 23 and fought roughly the same level of competition here, maybe a little bit stronger, was a Kraken, and that is supposed to be roughly, according to CR, the same strength as Baphomet. So if you were to imagine the current Bell's Hells fighting a Kraken, that's how well that fight would go against Baphomet, which probably wouldn't be very great, because I'm pretty sure a stronger Vox Machina took on a Kraken, and they got messed up. In fact, one of them died. I then chucked in a medium difficulty level and hit generate, and I got a Lich and a Ancient Copper Dragon. Now, what's funny about this is, I honestly think this is actually roughly the level of which Dominox might be at. And it just goes to show you how weird CR is, with a Lich and a, Ancient Copper Dragon being like the next thing down. And then after that, I chucked in easy, and I got some other weird stuff, which I didn't think was like, very compelling stuff that they were giving me to generate. So then I elected to just throw in a Balor, another demon, to see where exactly that would fall on the list. And when I chucked in Balor against 7 level 13s, it came up as a easy encounter. Now the CR difference is only 2. A Balor is a 19 and an Ancient Copper Dragon is a 21. So, when you look at CR, it's not perfect, because that seems ridiculous how a 2 difference in CR would make it an easy encounter versus a hard encounter. But I genuinely do think a Balor or stronger might be roughly the strength of Dominox. And I think this does go to point that we're likely going to have Ludinus jump into the fight to make this a much harder encounter / a deadly encounter. But of course, Matt Mercer just doesn't leave stat blocks alone, and he likes to adjust them. He is notorious for having hundreds and hundreds of hit points added to certain monsters, and he very much loves his layer actions. So realistically, we're looking at something probably stronger than just an Ancient Copper Dragon as far as CR terms, which is kind of ridiculous. Combat rating terms being the way they aren't perfect, like I mentioned before. So we have to take combat ratings with a grain of salt. So I think I'm comfortable when I say that the placement for wherever Dominox is somewhere between a Balor and Baphomet. Now I'm leaning much closer to the idea that it is stronger, closer to Baphomet, because imagine just, a Balor being there. That's kind of boring. But something closer to Baphomet's strength, and a Grand Demon sounds much more befitting of something just below Baphomet. Yes, technically a Balor is something that is just below or a little bit weaker than Baphomet, but literally, I feel like you could slide something in between Balor and Baphomet, and it feels right. And honestly, it does feel right to say that this creature, whatever Dominox is, lies between them. And I feel like that is very fitting, and it's closer to Baphomet. Because just imagine you walk into the room, this entire party walks into the room, of which, by the way, is actually more than 7, which I calculated just for 7, but it is 9, because now we have Tavon and we have Essek. Of course, Essek is getting closer to tapped. He has mentioned that in the past. But it is more like 9 people. So imagine 9 people of reasonable strength at level 13 walking up to a Balor. That just doesn't seem very intimidating when you just look at it as a grand whole. But imagine 9 people at level 13 walking up to Baphomet. That seems much more dangerous, and like Baphomet could still win this fight. Whereas a Balor, he might hurt them a lot, but I don't think a Balor has a chance to win that fight. So realistically, Baphomet being closer to the strength of Dominox makes much more sense in my eyes. So now we have a rough idea or theory on where exactly he sort of falls on the power spectrum, somewhere between a Balor and Baphomet. But what exactly makes him such? What makes him this powerful entity? What exactly makes him so powerful? Well, we learned from one of the ancient Aeorians on the ground, once they used Speak with Dead, exactly what that key thing that makes him so powerful might be.
I think he's just gotten released. The seal's broken. He's out.
Dominox is fucking with us.
What is Dominox attracted to?
Dominox feeds on insecurity.
Oh, God.
We're fucked.
I will go talk to him. It's fine. I got this covered.
I, for one, welcome our new demonic master.
It introduces the suffering of self-loathing.
Oh, shit.
Until you present yourself to oblivion.
Great.
And he feeds.
Oh no.
So much like that clip just said, Dominox feeds off insecurity and introduces self-loathing until you give yourself up to oblivion. Now, for this group, that's wraps. This group is filled with insecurity, and self-loathing is not too far behind. This group already does that quite a lot. There's a lot of self-pity, self-doubt, and all of that is led back to insecurity. So realistically, this group has a ton of insecurities, and it might be a terrible matchup. Dominox is the worst possible matchup for this group. Not just because of that, but let's just look at it game mechanic wise. When Chetney fell to the illusion that Dominox put on him, it was a wisdom save, and he rolled a 17 and still failed. While that doesn't seem too out of the ordinary, if you take a look at the party's stats here, that is bad because they are all pretty terrible at wisdom, or not terrible, but none of them like truly excel with the exception of Fern. Chetney sits at a 14 on his wisdom, which means he has a +2. Same with Laudna. Dorian has a 9, which means he has a -1. He is going to be the one who gets affected the most, and then Fern obviously has a 20, because that is what her class is built around, wisdom. So luckily, there is at least one person here who has a +5, or higher than 3, in the fact that they're going to be able to defend against Dominox, which is very good for her. And not to mention her saving throw is probably higher than that because saving throw, she's proficient in that. So luckily for Fern, she's probably A-okay. But then you look at Imogen, who has a 13, which means she has a +2, I believe. And then obviously Orem, 16. I think that means he has a +3, which is the second highest in the group, which while it's still not very good, it's still better than being at a -1 like Dorian. And then Ashton is at a 13 as well, which means he has a +2, if I'm not mistaken. I might be mistaken. You might have a +1, which is still pretty bad. But either way, luckily, Fern is really good at this, and she's the only one. I don't know what Essex sits at, and we don't know what Tavon sits at, but realistically, this team might be screwed when it comes to wisdom saves. And yeah, that's not looking very good. And especially if it's able to turn the tide and Dominox is able to sort of shift them towards his side and start attacking people, which we know he does. We don't know how many he can do that to at a time. I would imagine it's 1, because every time we've sort of seen a situation like this, whether it's 2 people or the best situation we have, which was the tent back in the Genesis ward, or the upper level of the Genesis ward, which was a single elf started fighting the rest of the people within the tent for the Ruby Vanguard. So it looks like Dominox might only be able to target one person at a time, and if he chooses poorly and goes after Fern, they might be safe for a bit, but if he chooses correctly and goes after Dorian, it's going to turn into, a bit of a numbers shift, and Dorian might shift to the bad side. So who knows? But I think this is what makes Dominox so powerful and so dangerous. The fact that he is able to feed on insecurity, which every person in the world has, and then make you want to kill your friends. So realistically, that's a really good tool. That's a very dangerous tool, especially because insecurity is something that everyone has, and this group in particular has a lot of them. So let me know what you think. Do you think I'm accurate in my assessment in saying that he falls somewhere between a Balor and Baphomet? Do you think that I'm overthinking this whole, wisdom save thing and the insecurity thing? Do you think that the party's going to be able to push through? Let me know. I'm very curious what you think down below. And if you were at the live show, please, God, do not spoil anything. Please, God, don't spoil anything. That would be so uncool of you, and you will instantly get the ban hammer. I swear to God, if there's a spoiler in one of my comments, ban hammer coming down hard on you. But anyway, I will see you guys on Friday for the recap of the Bell Cells live show, or episode 98 of Campaign 3 of Critical Role. So I'll see you guys then. Peace.